Hello, thank you for joining me today. I'm joined by my guests, Daniel and Nelly from the multi-award winning digital marketing agency, Art Division. How are you doing, guys?
Hello, David. I'm very well, thank you.
Hi, David. Doing well, thank you.
Nice to have you on board today. We're going to try and tackle a subject which every agent should know about, but let's face it, it's a little bit like the legislation side of our industry. It changes pretty much from month to month and week to week. There always seems to be a new update that we need to keep on top of, and agents have enough to keep on top of with new changes, but you can't afford sometimes to ignore them, and we need more info. So the specific change that we're talking about is Google Analytics 4, which we may refer to as well as GA4. Daniel, I understand you're the resident guru for anything to do with GA4. Can you, for those of us that aren't familiar with what it is and what it does, can you give us a bit of a background to it, please?
Yeah, love to. So GA4 is, effectively put simple, it's just exactly the same as what you currently know as Google Analytics. Nothing has changed, with the exception of how it's being implemented when you put it on your website and what you need to do in order for it to work. But in its core, it will do exactly the same as what probably every estate agent watching this now will know, which is allowing you to track the actions that happens on your website, how many visitors I have, which pages they're visiting, for how long are they staying, all of those things that we'll probably dig in a bit deeper later. But in essence, GA4 and regular Google Analytics, or GA3 as we now refer to it, is exactly the same, but yes, there are nuances and there will be adaptations of what needs to happen moving forward for you to be able to use it.
So this isn't just an update though, is it? I mean, is it an improvement? Is it a better tool than GA3 was? I mean, what noticeable differences are there going to be?
So I think that for your regular Joe, so the estate agents sitting out there, they probably wouldn't necessarily notice a difference per se when they look at the data. The data will be the same type of data. But for us as marketeers, or anyone who wants to take just one step further to understand what is the data that is being happening, or the data that is appearing on their website, GA4, Google Analytics 4, definitely give us more in-depth data. And also it allows us now by default to see more KPIs that before was much harder for us to notice. Just to give one single example, in the past, if you wanted to understand how many people reached a certain place on your page as they were scrolling down your regular page on your website, we really needed to bend over backwards to achieve that. Now things like that become much simpler if you know how to implement them with GA4. So this is just one example of where we can benefit from having GA4 installed on our websites.
And I guess it's true what they say, you can't manage what you can't measure. And if you can measure it, then at least you then, I mean, if you would turn around to me and sort of give me all the analytics on my website, I could then choose to decide, well, there's a part of my website that no one ever visits. And I can see that because we get no traffic. It's a waste. Can we fill that with something else? Can we refine the sort of messaging or the placement of, even the placement of objects on a website, I guess? It really will affect the customer experience and that journey that they take when they hit your website.
No, you hit the nail on its head there. And I think anyone who worked with us before knows that we are very hot on anything tracking. We love tracking, we love our numbers, we love our statistics, because at the end of the day, to improve on what you do, you must understand your data, right? You need to measure. If you don't measure, how do you know if you're moving forward, backwards, you're staying the same? You don't. And when it comes to analytics, really it splits into two. You have your raw data. As we said earlier, how many people arrive to a specific page? Which are the pages people are arriving to? This is just very basic data. But then you mentioned the journey. What journey do they take? They come and they enter your website in page X and they exit at page Y. And in the middle, they might have actually filled out a form on the website, right? So all of those pieces in the journey of your customers, they need to be tracked. Currently, with your regular Google Analytics, it's much harder to track this journey. Google Analytics 4 will actually give us a much, much simpler way of having those journeys being put in a very visual manner. So for you as an agent, I guess, you're busy selling, letting, managing, whatever it might be. All you want is somebody to put in a very simple way for you. Look, people came in here, they went out in here, and this is what we got in the middle. Well, GA4 will allow you to do that.
Okay, so being that doing nothing is also an option that people can take, and that's actually doing something. When you are, if I were to say to you, look, I haven't got the head for this GA4 thing, I'm going to worry about this in the future. For now, I'm going to stick with GA3, and it seems to be doing what it's doing. Can I afford to take that view, or eventually is that going to catch up with me?
I think that depends. If you are by definition somebody who don't care about your traffic and about your statistics and your analytics, forget about it. You don't need to worry about it. I'm only guessing that if you're listening to this specific webinar, you do have some curiosity because you are using, to one degree or another, Google Analytics. You want to understand your data. Now, look, Google announced that probably mid next year, they will shift into GA4. This is at least what they say officially. It might be delayed. It's not going to be any earlier, but it's definitely, this is kind of like the guidance that they gave us. Not like with other maybe updates or suggestions by Google, this is a change that is going to happen. So one way or another, you need to adopt yourself into moving on to, if you still want to use Google Analytics, you will need to learn how to use Google Analytics 4. What Google has done last year, which we've already adopted to the clients that we work with at the moment, is they allowed us to take the code of Analytics 4 and put it on the websites of clients so the data start accumulated, right? Because what's going to happen is coming next year, if you waited until the point where Google is doing the switch, and only then you start tracking all these visitors arriving to your websites, the information you're going to have is only from that point moving forward.
Yeah. Everything
that happens until then, you wouldn't know. And that you will have a lag of understanding because the platforms will operate slightly different. There will be a very long adaptation period for you until you get your head around how it works. So our suggestions is the sooner you can put the codes in, start getting the data over, so it starts accumulating. And even if right now you don't really understand how to look at the data and how it needs to be displayed and how you understand it, at least it's there. So when the time comes a year from now, there is already a substantial amount of information you can dissect, you can look at, you can slice and dice the way it works for your agency.
So forgive the question if it seems uninformed, but I'm just an estate agent. I'm good at selling houses. The technical side of things, somebody else normally takes care of for me. Do I need to sort of delete GA3? Can I have GA3 and GA4 running together? What comes first?
Great question. So they can definitely run together, and Google definitely allow for you to be able to run the two codes together. There is a slight a portion of setup that needs to happen for you to be able to take the secondary code, GA4, and integrate it into your current Google Analytics, GA3, and having both of them working in peace with each other. Not a big issue, I guess. If you know how to do it, you will need to have probably a technical person do it for you. But just to have that code being put in, probably is the simplest part. You need to bear in mind that just having the code appearing on your website and grabbing the information, it's only one piece of the puzzle. And the second piece of also making sense out of this data that you're capturing is super important, because just having data for the purpose of having data also makes no sense. You might as well just don't put the code in.
Okay, that all makes sense. And I'll add another layer to that. I wouldn't even trust myself to know where to put that code or how to handle it. So I'd be much better off talking to the professionals about it. So maybe actually this is a more of a question for Nelly. Nelly, will every website work with GA4? Do agents need to change the current websites in order to make it fit for purpose? Are there easier ways of achieving what Daniel knows to be true? how do we marry up those two sides?
That's a very interesting question, and it's actually a very difficult question to answer because it really depends on how an estate agent website was built to begin with, how old it is. But generally, there will have to be changes made because the Google Analytics 4 works with events, whereas the previous Analytics, Universal Analytics 3, works in a very different way in terms of tracking. And so in order to track events, the websites need to allow this event tracking to happen. We had to completely recode our website. We have a product which is helping us to produce websites for estate agents, and it's a very modular product. So in order for us to work alongside Google Analytics 4, we had to completely recode a big chunk of our modules. And so now out of the box, we're able to track events. And by event, just to clarify what that means, clicking of a button is an event. Filling in a form and completing that form is another event. Booking a valuation is an event. Booking a viewing is an event. And those are the kind of events that need to be tracked in analytics, ideally, and they're called goals. So when one sets a Google Analytics account, the first step really is to define their goals and to set them up in their account so they can understand every month how many of those goals they've had completed so they can compare month on month.
Yeah.
So with those events, we have a lot more things that we can track. Whereas before, by default, you couldn't track a click of a button, whereas now you can. And so the result of that is that the websites need to be updated code-wise. And so the quick answer is it's not necessarily a simple task. Some website providers will be able to do that change within existing websites. Some will probably say they can't, especially if they're too old. I would suspect that templated websites, it will be a bit harder for them to do because it was designed to kind of work for a number of clients. But again, it will be hard for me to answer on behalf of the website providers. I can only say from our point of view, we had to make technical changes to our core product in order for it to work alongside Google Analytics 4. And that was not a simple task. It is not a 5-minute task. It's actually quite complex. And it has taken our programmer quite some time to get his head around it. Now, what I would recommend, however, is if anyone is getting a new website build, they should really take Google Analytics 4 into account. So they have to demand the new website to be GA4 ready. So they should ensure that it's configured to work with Google Analytics 4. So at least they have control over how the websites are being coded now. Obviously, for all the websites, it's a question mark. But one way or another, this needs to be addressed by the summer of next year if the agents would like to continue using analytics, because once Google Analytics 3 is switched off, they can still keep their account, but they will not be able to gather more data within Google Analytics 3. At that point, from the summer of next year, Google Analytics 4 will replace Google Analytics 3, and the data will only go into that new Google Analytics. So if their websites are not adapted up until the summer of next year, they will not have that new data being gathered correctly.
But our division do create superb websites for estate agents, and all yours out of the box already have this functionality built in. And I'm presuming, with you guys being experts on it, you're going to be keeping on top of any changes. So if I do have a website with you, those changes are also going to be implemented over time. And I'm going to be able to sort of go to bed at night knowing that you're kind of on top of that. All I have to do is bring in the houses, right?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, any new client buying a website from us can buy our Google Analytics 4 add-on, and they will have that connection sorted for a very small fee. Any of our existing clients, we are in a process of putting together a step-by-step plan of how to implement it, but they will be contacted And we are in a position to be able to integrate that. Pretty much all of our marketing clients already have a Google Analytics 4, and we will be going through and working on setting things up for them, etc. So yes, we are pretty much doing all the work for our clients, and we are sorting out what needs to be sorted out for our existing clients, and our new clients can benefit from that. And yes, for us, this is crucial, especially because we are a marketing agency. And obviously tracking is very, very important to ensure that any campaign we run, we can understand what works and what doesn't, so we can make improvements.
And if we're one of those agents that just want to bury our head in the sand and say, look, you know, I don't care what Google's doing, I'm not measuring anything, I just want my website to run, and I'm presuming that Google, in terms of its relevance within the sort of technology space, but also the analytical data that I'm able to get back, but also the way that my website is ranked in search results, and the way you cannot afford to divorce yourself from Google. As an agent, you need to embrace that and sort of use it to your advantage, because it is such an important provider, isn't it, in terms of search data, in terms of the way that our websites are made or classed as being relevant to the people that are looking for estate agents. So I'm presuming burying our head in the sand or saying, I'm not going to work with Google, that doesn't work.
Well, to be fair, I find that there are two types of estate agents. Those that believe in digital marketing and they invest in digital marketing, and those that don't. And I have come across quite a few agents who will not invest in digital marketing. They see their websites as online brochures, and they only put them together so they've got something. Or they grow purely via acquisition. So they buy other businesses, and this is how they grow. Now, obviously, for them, whether they have Google Analytics or not is kind of irrelevant, because if you don't invest in digital marketing, if you don't care about whether your website generates you leads and converts, then there's no point in tracking. Of course, for everyone else, all the agents who are recognizing the importance of digital marketing, the importance of driving customers via Google search, via social media, via email marketing, or any other digital channel that they use, they need to have a proper tracking mechanism in place. And obviously Google Analytics is probably one of the best and free ones that they can install. Of course, if they don't want to use Google Analytics, there are other tools that also provide data. But Google Analytics is the one that is most widely used, is free. And you know, if one is to choose which one to start with, that should be a no-brainer. They have to have Google Analytics. Now, obviously, there are many ways you can use Google Analytics. I know that a lot of agents do not have time to look at their analytics data on a regular basis. Of course, if you are using a marketing agency that helps you with your marketing, they should be the ones looking at the data and providing you with information that is easy to absorb. If you do have regular meetings on the progress, and obviously in order for you to attract leads, you need to understand where those leads are coming from and where your opportunities lie. Maybe that should be part of your quarterly meetings, having a look at your data and assessing and making decisions based on that. But it's, you know, it goes without saying, if you don't have Google Analytics 4 installed by next summer, you will not have the data coming in going forward. So it's something that every estate agent should be paying attention and actually adding the code right now, as Daniel is saying, in order to start gathering the data from today, so that by next summer, they will have enough data, at least 1 year's worth of data in the new Google Analytics. So when the old one is switched off, they'll end up with the data up until that point in Google Analytics 3. And from Google Analytics 4, they'll have a 12 months worth of data and everything going forward.
Yeah.
And I'm presuming this ability to track and to measure things helps when we start to scale our businesses larger, or if you are acquisitive and you just keep adding some brands to your global brand, but you've then got a lot of traffic to decide where, you know, where it goes to, how best to funnel all your marketing. Presumably for scalability, this ability to sort of measure and to receive this data is very important.
Well, from our point of view, there are a few sections on an estate agency website that is very, very important to track. Obviously, the most obvious one is the pages that are ranking for terms such as estate agency and a specific location. So obviously, the first thing is to understand where they rank, how much traffic they're getting from that search term. Are there any opportunities they're missing out? But really, where we can actually gather even more insights is with content such as blogging. There are obviously a lot of estate agents are producing blogs on a regular basis, but the real value in blogging is to rank those blogs and to generate traffic from those blogs. So if you have a blog that ranks exceptionally well and you don't know about this, then you can't take further actions. And the kind of further actions that we tend to take are thinking about what calls to action we can introduce within a blog that's already bringing a lot of traffic. So we have a client that we wrote a blog article back in 2018. In 2019, we realized that this blog article was generating roughly about 11,000 visitors for a 12-month period, which is a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have known that if we didn't look at the analytics data. And then because of that knowledge, we enhanced the article, we inserted a lot more calls to action. And then the following year and the year after that, not only did we carry on driving that traffic to the site because the blog was already ranking, but we increased the conversion rate from that blog into things like people entering our email sequences or people downloading free things that we were offering, or even booking evaluation requests. So it is important to understand what to look at, why you're looking at that, and when you are finding information that's useful, what to do with that information.
Yeah, I just want to touch on one thing that Nelly said earlier, which I think is very important, and I think maybe there just to avoid any confusion. So from an implementation of Google Analytics 4, every website, every conceivable website can have the code running and track the data. That's not an issue. So you can have, that's just to answer to your original question, can it just run on any website? What Nelly was actually referring to when she said it really depends on how old your website is, what can be tracked, is the actual tracking. So just having the data, it's one thing, which is great. But from that point to allow Google Analytics 4, which is something that many people don't know, but Analytics 4 is the childbirth of Google Analytics 360, which used to be available only to companies that pays above 100K a year for the service from Google. And now they've given it to the public in the form of Google Analytics 4. We're getting a lot now for free. But in order for this to work, the site needs to have different coding mechanisms that allows those events Nelly was talking about earlier. So an event can be any KPI that is important to you, you know, the button clicks, the form submissions, the time on the site, the video they watch, any of those can be an event. You decide what events are important for you. And then you tell Google Analytics, I want you to track that. And one of the things that we have done at our division is we've created a default list of KPIs, of events that the minute you put Google Analytics 4 in, they will be tracked for you. You don't need to pay anyone extra for anything. You turn it on, it's there, it's working, it will be tracked out of the box, turnkey, working. This is where, when you talk about any other platform currently available that will just have Google Analytics 4 running on it, whilst the code will be running and you will see the default traffic arriving, nothing will be tracked. Somebody will need to teach the system to track something. Those of you that maybe are a little bit more technical will know that usually to achieve that, you use Tag Manager. We currently use Tag Manager to achieve those kind of fancy tracking mechanisms because there is no any other way, super technical. You need to be very, very technical to achieve those. But moving forward with Google Analytics 4, a site that is being built correctly from the ground up or being adopted like we are now doing with all of our new website coming out, we'll have those events already ready for Analytics 4 to say, hi, Analytics 4, great, listen, here is all those KPIs, you can track me, track my form, track my buttons, track my video, great, it works out of the box. And so I think this is where the two very important separation happens. And, you know, when we talk about the likes of you have all this traffic that arrived to a website, and unless you knew about it, how would you know which actions to take? This is super important. Nelly gave the example of a blog post that was ranking and it was working brilliantly. And on the other side of that, you have things like, right, so we have this button of a form that sits here, and we learned from our clients that actually we had all those people arriving, but we only had X amount of people clicking, and we felt that it makes no sense. That too many people arriving, too little people actually taking action. Why?
Yeah.
And when you look at analytics and you can start making tweaks and test those things, and you can push buttons a little bit up, or you can change a color, and you can then ask analytics back to you, analytics. Now that we've changed the color, are we seeing better results? And analytics says, yes, we do actually. We see 20% more results. Well, again, what does that mean for you? 20% more valuation coming into your leads generation system. Well, you can't argue with that, but you can only understand that if you have tracking in place. In this case, we're talking about Google, by far the simplest and most advanced tool that you can get for free. And yeah, this is why we have so much passion for that, because we definitely believe that this is where all the difference comes from.
And it sounds like this is a great leveler in terms of allowing smaller companies to be able to almost compete with the big ones that have had access to similar tools for quite some time. Now we're making that uniform across the board. If you can harness it properly, it can be a very, very powerful use of data.
I totally agree. And I think that where most people fail is with the understanding that tracking is important. Some people just think that it's not important, and it's probably one of the biggest mistakes, right? You just need to understand you as an estate agent finish your year and you submit your accounts to your accountant, the numbers are there so you can understand the numbers, right? You understand if you're profitable or not profitable, if the business is doing well or not. Yeah. Analytics is the same. You need to understand how your website is performing. You need to see the information in front of you. And then of course, seeing the information is great, but what information are you seeing? And this is where the events and the tracking and deciding together with the clients, what is the most important thing for you? What are your KPIs? What are those really, really important pieces that if we knew to tell you about them, will make a difference to your business? And this is where analytics comes to play.
And you're right. It's so often we can create beautiful content, we can create beautiful websites, but if we don't get the calls to action right, then we're guilty really of just leaving that money on the table, because research has proven that if we can get the calls to action in the right place, if you can word it in the right way and it's presented as something that's possibly going to help somebody in their journey, then you're going to get clicks, you're going to get engagement, and these are the events that you are referring to.
Well, I can tell you, David, something very interesting. One of the pieces of data that we saw from a variety of different clients we work with, probably one of the most fascinating one, was that because we track everything, and because we can also then zoom out and look at the big numbers, I can tell you that by definition, when we work with clients that utilize the different channels that we can track, because we can track it, we can now say that, for example, about 48% plus of all the conversions, and when I say conversions, I mean evaluations that were carried out and then instructions that were given to the clients, can actually be attributed to the digital marketing efforts. I wouldn't be able to sit here and tell you that if I didn't have that information on my Excel sheets proving that black on white, that this is exactly the case. Now, I wouldn't be able to tell you that if we didn't track and if we didn't see the numbers. And then you will have an agent maybe sitting there and saying, why do I need digital marketing? Well, I'll tell you why. Because if what you want is to have an extra 48% of your conversion happening, you need digital marketing.
Yeah.
This is why. Factually. There you go. Track.
Can't argue with that.
Yes.
Superb. So just as a reminder for everybody watching this is something that you need to, you can sleep with it if you want, and wait to wake up next year when some people have already harnessed that data and started to measure it and started to manage it, or you can get on board today. And I'm presuming, Nelly, the best place to start with all of this is a review of your current website and perhaps look at how that can be adapted.
Yes, I mean, every agent has a few options here. The first option is obviously to contact the current web agency that they're using and see how they can implement Google Analytics 4 on their website, and then what else can they do to set things up, like Daniel was saying, to properly track events. This is more of a specialist skill, so there may be some web design companies that might not be able to do it, some will be able to do that, but that's the first thing. If they feel that their current website is dated, perhaps it's 2 or more years older, and it's about time that they update the website and get a new website, of course, I mean, I would welcome that they have a chat with us, and we will be able to build them a new website with Google Analytics code ready. Or they have to ask the new web company to actually ensure that it is not only code is added, but also the events are properly connected. And the Google Analytics 4 is properly set up so that it tracks the KPIs accordingly. So those are generally the few options. Or if they contact their current web agency and that agency cannot help them, now obviously the next thing is to contact a specialist that can integrate Google Analytics 4 and obviously set things up for them. I mean, they can by all means contact us as well. If we are able to help, we will. If we can't help, we'll tell them that we can't. But yeah, those are all the options, and I would recommend that they look at the options and they take some action today.
Well, I would highly recommend, from what we've learned today, that an agent spend some time having a consultation with you guys, because you understand this, and you also understand how important it is and how you can harness it to actually increase revenue, I think, overall, in terms of how we can drive our traffic differently and get our calls to action really optimized in terms of the goals. And you used the word before, KPIs. We would think that KPIs are obviously important. We set them for staff members. We want them to achieve so many things, but you should be setting KPIs as well for the technology that's working for you, including your website. What do you want it to do? It is not just an expense. It should be working for you in order to generate that revenue.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, if anyone is interested in having a chat, I'm happy to offer 45 minutes free consultation where I will give you at least 3 things you can do to improve your website today. And then you can go to your web design agency and do that. Obviously, if you want to have a chat about a new website, then I'll be delighted to have a chat with you. But equally, I'm happy to offer 45 minutes consultation. Ask me anything, and then I'll be happy to help.
Spend some time talking to the guys at Art Division. They're very helpful. They're very nice to deal with. And I'd like to thank you both for the time that you've given today. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thanks for
Thank you very
coming.
much, David.